Betrayal doesn't just damage a relationship. It damages something else that's hard to repair. Your trust in yourself. Your sense of who you are. Your confidence that you can read people, make good decisions, know what's real. The woman who once felt capable and grounded suddenly doesn't recognize herself. She second-guesses everything. She's afraid to trust her own instincts. And the question that haunts her isn't just, can I trust him again? It's, can I trust me? My guest today has lived through her own version of that unraveling and built a framework for finding your way back. Zerina Dervini is a life coach whose signature 5-phase self-discovery framework helps women move from lost and stuck to clear, grounded, and living authentically. We talk about the shift from why did this happen to what do I need now? Why self-trust is harder to rebuild than it sounds, and how to begin even when you're still in the middle of pain. I'm Tim Tedder. Thank you for listening in.
I don't even know where to start.
Well, that's what the resource finder is for. It's at affairhealing.com/find. It's a tool that helps you find exactly what you need right now. Search by topic or category and find resources for the injured partner, the involved partner, and for couples. It's all there. Podcasts, articles, courses, free downloads, videos.
What if I just want to know what's most recommended?
Well, they put that at the top of your search. And you can see everything that's new on the site, too.
affairhealing.com/find.
That's where to start.
Welcome to The Recovery Room, a podcast presented by affairhealing.com.
In this healing place, in this healing place.
I know in my work, especially with women who have been affected by betrayal, that oftentimes on the other side of that, there's really a struggle in regards to how they see themselves. Not only what is wrong with me, but how did I miss this? How do I even trust my examination and my conclusions about life, relationships, and my partner? And they struggle. Can you talk about that a little bit in regards to how that's parallel to what you do and how you approach issues like that?
I think there's actually a big parallel to self-trust and self-identity. And that's really my signature framework, is helping my clients when they're feeling lost or stuck, understand their identity, understand their beliefs, understand their values, and kind of come back home, right? So there is definitely a connection there. And I think it's tied to self-worth. When we are facing betrayal or when we are facing challenges in life that can shift our identity or our idea of self-worth, that's when we start to really take a look at what's happening internally, what's happening emotionally, and more importantly, how we are identifying ourselves with that event that is unpleasant. You know, my whole journey was going through my own series of events and realizing I was tying events, things that were happening to me that were not pleasant, to my identity. And exactly what you said, why did this happen to me? You know, our nervous system, especially as women, we are so programmed to understand why things are happening versus shifting it to what do I need to do now? And that really, kind of removes the blame from what's happening to you.
Zerina, I think it's very common for most of us when we're going through disappointments and these challenges to tell ourselves there's something about our circumstances, something about, what life is bringing to us, that we're just victims of something, or we just happen to be unlucky, or, well, here it happens again. And it's harder to kind of go to that place of self-reflection to consider, is there something about me that I need to learn? There's something about me that I need to change. What was it that turned that for you to look inward like that and ask those questions?
I think for me, it was definitely being scared to repeat the same patterns more than change. I think I had to get to that point of frustration where I was like, it is scarier for me to go through another round of making decisions based on what I was doing at that time. And kind of to what you said, Tim, like thinking, oh, it will be better next time, like doing the same thing over and over again and thinking it will be better next time. That was scarier for me than me actually facing myself and changing. So it took that, moment of whether it was frustration, whether it was empowerment, it really took me to be in that moment to be like, enough is enough and to do something different.
That woman who is in the position of having been betrayed and dealing with all the insecurities, the lack of trust in herself, the confusion about what's next. How does that woman begin to develop self-trust when she's still in the middle of the pain? Because I think the tendency for them is also to look at everything that's outward. Well, this is all happening to me because of circumstances and because of all these things that are external. How does that woman begin to look inside of herself and learn some of those things are important about trusting herself too?
So instead of asking, why did this happen? Shift that to, what do I need to do now? So I think that's a really big awakening phase. And I talk a lot about phases in my self-discovery framework. There are 5, but the first one is you need to have that awakening phase, that self-awareness phase. And with women, again, we are just programmed to understand why something is happening, project that self-blame, like we could have done something about it. There is just that natural way of thinking, and we need to be aware of it consciously, that our subconscious is working like that. So you have to make a conscious decision to stop that way of thinking and then shift it from, what do I need to do now? For the most part, the first step is first you need to give yourself some space, some grace, right? So something has just happened to you. Yes, we want a solution right away in an ideal world, but the reality is no, we don't go into solution mode until first we understand what our needs are. It's a process. Like in the self-discovery framework I teach my clients, you don't get to a solution until the final step. So there are processes in there for a reason. And that is actually the human experience. So let's not forget that we are human.
Yeah. Getting to the place of learning to trust yourself, I mean, where is that along the steps of healing and change? Is that a beginning step, or is that something that comes later on?
During those situations, Tim, for women, we start to almost misunderstand fear for intuition. So I have to do a little bit of work there with women on bringing them back to their actual core intuition. And unfortunately, that requires a woman to be more relaxed. So we have to work through that fear with them and really get to the bottom of what their intuition is leading them to. And it's a process. And the idea here is to take it one step at a time.
Yeah, and I would imagine for someone in crisis, tapping into that intuition that maybe at one point was easier for them to look at and understand and feel and make decisions on, that probably feels a little bit more out of reach. And I guess is that what you're talking about, learning to self-trust? Like that's part of you that you need to hear and you need to give importance to.
Exactly. Yeah. It becomes even a decision-making compass for us, our intuition, right? So when we're going through challenges, that's kind of frozen and then fear overtakes. So our nervous system is all over the place. But I do want to remind everyone that self-trust really is who you are and how you see yourself, regardless of any external validation, what's happening. So to get to a really core meaning of self-trust, just imagine like the amount of work that needs to get done to get there, right? And again, it requires understanding your emotions, understanding yourself. And then it also requires you having a clear mindset of who you want to be, right? What you actually want. The one question that is so fascinating to ask anyone is, hey, what are your needs? You will never get more of a pause than asking someone that. And it's such a hard question because it's so true. What are our needs, right? Have we even thought about it? So imagine having someone gone through betrayal or just a really challenging moment in their life. They are not at that place yet to go into clarifying what their needs are until they actually do the work. And once you do the work, you have more clarity on who you are and your self-trust just naturally starts to build.
When you ask that question, what are your needs? Is the answer you're looking for more on the things that are outside of that person? I mean, the needs that I have in relationship, the needs I have in the workplace, the needs I have in my environment. Are you asking that question looking for answers that come from what's within them? The needs for self-reliance, self-trust, whatever that would be, those kinds of things. What is it that you want to hear from them?
It's a little bit of both, actually. It's interesting you're asking me that question because I've never thought about it from that perspective. But basically, I'll give you an example. So if I am saying, what do you need? And someone is responding with, I want a healthy relationship. I want good people around me. I'm thinking, okay, they need connection, right? I'm thinking in value terms. If someone's saying, I need a really stable job and financial income, I'm thinking security or stability. So it's really simplifying their needs in words from a value perspective. So again, they're not tied to this one outcome. It's more so, this is important to me.
Yeah,
And actually it's important.
but even in that, when you talk about the need for connection, I mean, there's different ways to look at that. Someone can say, yeah, I know that that's one of my core needs, to be connected. But for many, the solution to that is something, again, outside. Well, I haven't found the right person. I have a need for satisfaction, but I haven't found the right job. I'm assuming those things are important to find a right person, to find a right job. But so many times those needs are not being met because of something that's internal in them too. I guess that's why you're saying it's a little bit of both.
Yeah. And it's true. And I think I've dealt with a lot of, I can't find the right person. I've actually been in those shoes myself. What's interesting? We don't have the answer, and that is okay. So sometimes saying, maybe you're not clear about what you want. Because remember, when we're clear with anything in life, when we're clear on this is what I want, we just go for it. Everything else is noise. That goal is our signal. We just work towards it. And oftentimes we don't know, and that is okay. We think we know what we want, or maybe we want just the outcome, but we're not really sure what that outcome looks like. So it's bringing that question back. Okay, what about a relationship do you need? What do you want from this person? And I'm really big on whatever it is that you want, let's clarify it and simplify it 1 to 3 things, right? Because we don't want a list of 20. That will get you confused. It's what do you want? How do we get there? But it is a very difficult question. When I ask people, what are your needs? It's like I've asked them something like so secretive and exposing, and it's such a hard question, and many of us cannot answer it. And it requires a lot of internal work to understand what our needs are.
Well, let's talk about one need in the context of infidelity. And that's the need in a relationship for trust to be reestablished. Not every relationship survives. Not every person chooses to stay in a relationship or marriage after infidelity occurs. But for those that do choose to stay and want to work on it, trust is a big issue. It's probably foundational and one of the most important things that have to be dealt with. What is the difference between a betrayed person learning to trust their partner and that same person learning to trust themselves?
Probably the narrative that they have in their head. There's this internal narrative that we all have, by the way, regardless of betrayal or not, right? Betrayal just brings it out of us.
Yeah, it's so interesting when something taps into those messages that are somewhere back there, those impressions about themselves, and how that can change a person. I'm sure, like you, I've been witness to women who are extremely successful, extremely strong, self-confident, and then when they're hit with something like betrayal, which is at the core of what they thought they could trust, with someone that said, I'm committed to you for a lifetime, you can trust me, and they find out that's not true. I've seen those strong, capable women kind of turn into something that's almost unrecognizable. They're afraid, they're weak, they have no self-confidence, they don't know what to believe in or trust anymore. I mean, I'm sure you've seen that. What tends to be common in those experiences, and what hope do you give someone like that it can be better on the other side of working on this?
I've seen it so many times too. And sometimes it impacts those types of women the most and the worst, right? Because they are so used to being the strong one. It comes back to really the narrative they're telling themselves. And I think there is this self-blame. This happened to me. What could I have done to avoided it? Right. And that kind of keeps lingering in their head. So I think They start to lose, parts of their identity that are great because of that whole series of event that just happened. But I do want to make something clear here, Tim, and I'm sure you agree with this. The result of a betrayal, that's not the disappointing part that brings someone down. There are so many series of events that also get taken into consideration when you do face that betrayal, right? It happens slowly when you build a relationship with someone. So the moment that betrayal happens, some of us have years and years and years of experience with someone that could be disappointing. It's not just the act of. So it's bringing it back to the human experience, even though you are strong and your identity is based as a woman who is strong. It is rightfully your right to be upset about a situation that happened like betrayal. But then from there, take it as, okay, this happened to me. This is the human experience that a lot of us will face in different ways. Let's be humble and understand humility here for all of us. And then it's, what do I need to do right now, versus our brain is just naturally wired to go to why. And when we go to why, then we start thinking about all the times. And then our subconscious brain thinks in images. So just think of the speed. We start to see images, and it just becomes overwhelming and uncontrollable when we get to the why did this happen?
Yeah, it seems like the focus on the why, which is an important question, but some people stay focused on that, or focused on the questions and the needs and the whys and the controlling the environment out of that natural fear and out of that internal thing that just wants to protect themselves. But if they stay there, it seems like they're staying in a kind of victim mentality. In other words, here's all the stuff that's happened to me. They can live a life that's more governed by fear than anything. What you just said seems like it's encouraging that person that is afraid for legitimate reasons, that's hurt for a reason, but encouraging them to kind of step out of just that place to consider, what do I do now? What is that next step towards my healing or my change or my growth?
Yeah, I definitely would agree with that. And just want to be mindful, there is a process to grieving and going through all
Sure.
this. But I think having that conscious mindset of asking, what do I need now, really helps shift that narrative, or at least forces you to shift that narrative. So your mind is not going into self-blame and what did I do? And it's my fault. And what could I have done better? And this is tied to my self-worth. It goes to more practical, small next steps that you can do next just to go through that challenging period.
But Zerina, to do the things that are so natural and normal for us and the things that are self-protective, it's easier to do that. It feels like encouraging someone to take a step out of that must take them to the place that feels pretty vulnerable. I think based on previous conversations, you don't discourage stepping into a vulnerable place. Even though vulnerability can feel dangerous, it's probably an important thing to consider. How do you move through that?
It's actually something I had to struggle with in my life, in my relationships. I was so fearful of being vulnerable that I would automatically avoid it. My fear was protecting me by avoiding it. I had to do a lot of work to get to an understanding that you can start at your own pace. I think we have these ideas of what we need to do to be vulnerable, and it's not the human experience. I feel like I'm saying it's not the human experience so many times in a day, because it just really speaks to these ideologies that we have, where we hold these theories to reality, and that's just not life. So we all have our own ways on how we can tap into vulnerability. And I always say, start small, start with a sentence, expand your vocabulary, right? So for me, what helped me in my own journey was not necessarily getting to a place where I can be completely vulnerable. That was never going to happen from someone who couldn't do it to all of a sudden an expert. It was starting with important questions that I could ask that made me feel comfortable to dig a little bit deeper, create that safe space first. So there's a lot of preparation work that I teach my clients, because we're not going to go in and master something we're not good at. So let's just create the space, create the environment, have a few questions we feel comfortable doing it. And like everything in life, start small and just be a bit consistent. And I think that will help anyone tapping into that vulnerability. But kind of even tie down in betrayal, I think in those moments of such challenge and not really being able to trust, I would start with understanding what at that moment is the type of environment you need. Do you need isolation a little bit? Sometimes we do. Do you need a support system? Who is your support system at that time that can hopefully not give you any biased feedback, right? So just know what space you're creating so that you can start to be vulnerable at your own speed or your own capacity.
The women who come to you for help are all willing to spend some time and money because it's important for them to have some kind of shift or change in their life. But I'm sure you see some of them not really moving towards change. Maybe they remain stuck. Are there common barriers or roadblocks that you see that keep some women from being able to move forward?
There is that resistance to change, right? So when we are in the unlearning phase, the second phase of my self-discovery framework, we get to the third stage, which is exploration, right? So before we even know what we want, before we solution, let's explore a little. It makes life a bit more fun and it allows you or gives you permission to just seek things out without putting any labels to things. But I notice in the unlearning phase, the moment something happens again, people are still very nervous and their fear comes in right away. That's their autopilot reaction to things. And if I am questioning it, there is resistance to them thinking they know themselves better, which they do. They're really good at seeing the signals of fear. But then that's when I'm really trying to tell them, this is fear talking to you. This is not necessarily a good thing for you. I'm just letting you know, acknowledging it. So there are moments in those where I'm noticing a lot of resistance, but that's just, again, normal. So it really goes to the kind of the question you asked me earlier, Tim, like what caused me to change? It goes to you being fed up enough that you doing the same thing over and over again is scarier than change.
Yeah.
And some of us, you have to get there, right?
I mean, for me, that was certainly it. I didn't recognize the things in me I had to learn. I just explained it so much on circumstances or bad luck or whatever until enough of the pattern and the consequences to the pattern began to convince me, maybe there's something about me I need to figure out. So yeah, some of us get there the hard way for sure. So that second step of unlearning, the third step of exploration, what are the steps beyond that?
Once we get into exploration, and this is once we've had an understanding of unlearning our subconscious systems and replacing it with new systems, we get to put it out there in the world and explore and do things. And hopefully from there, build small habits and build new systems in your new way of thinking and doing. Then from there, we go into actual integration. So sometimes we think we need to be someone different or we need to change certain things. And sometimes it's good. Sometimes it's like, you know what? I kind of like the way I was once the nervous system is more normal and you have more clarity. So really it's choosing what you want to integrate into your new life or your new version of yourself. And then from there, we go to step 5, living authentically. To me, that means living a life that you are happy with, regardless of the external forces around you. It's funny, every time I have a client who's like, I want to be more authentic, I'm like, great, let's work on it. And then the next session, they're like, so-and-so said this. So I'm like, you're not ready. You're not ready. The moment you start including any sort of external validation to who you want to be, you're just not ready. And that's okay, but let's just acknowledge it, right? Because when you're ready, you live authentically and hopefully you live a more life of being authentic versus performative. And that's the goal here with the 5th step.
I love that because I think a lot of models that are moving people towards success and empowerment are about putting these things on them that worked for somebody else. And it seems artificial. And I've got to try to do this. And it's really not me, but if I do it, I'll get A, B, C, success, rewards, whatever. But you're talking about the kind of empowerment is just recognizing that thing within you that needs to be cultivated, understood, gaining insight into what holds that back, and being able to move forward. And I love that you end up with living authentically. I mean, bringing that out into a world that's kind of messy, that's maybe still kind of painful and uncertain, and yet being able to live with a kind of confidence and strength to be able to stand up in that and not be perfect with all our flaws and all those things, but to be able to say, yeah, but I am who I am and I'm growing and I'm learning through this and I'm going to be okay. I mean, that's pretty powerful.
And really, that was my goal in creating the self-discovery. It was my experience there was just so much pressure to this like solution, fix. Like I constantly felt pressured by myself, by the way. So that was my own narrative growing up. I had to almost create a system where it allowed you to give yourself permission to be human. And backing it up with science and backing it up with a lot of the way our mind and brain works, data, because I think that's really important. But let's not forget again that we are human. And the idea here is progress in life, right? And the very few sessions that I have with clients, it doesn't even matter what they're coming to me for. I always like to create a space of permission. Like, of course, this is what you're going through because look what's going on around you, acknowledging it, but not from a place of victim, but a place of this is the human experience. Let's do some shifting. Let's do some learning on who we are and who we want to be. And then let's explore. Let's live life. Let's create new systems. You can do that in life. That is okay. We're all going to be disappointed. We're all going to go through challenges. And it's how you keep moving from that that's more important versus what happened to you.
Yeah, Zerina, I hear you bringing a realistic perspective of this. You don't have this magical 5-step program that you just do this, read these, follow these 5 steps, and life is wonderful. No, it is messy. There's a lot of uncertainty. It's about who you're becoming in the middle of all of this. And you have a heart to especially want to empower women to not stay stuck in that broken or uncertain or fearful place, but to be able to move out of that and beyond it. I'm thinking about the woman who's listening to this podcast, who is hurt, who is broken, who is uncertain, who thinks the future she had anticipated has been stripped away for her and doesn't know what's left. What would you say to her right now?
Slow down. Start small. And I would definitely say this is an event that has happened to you. This is not an indication of your life, who you are, where your life is going. That reminder of this is an event. This is a tough season. So slow down, start small, and just make sure you understand what your next step is, what your next need is. And I think that is a really healthy starting point.
If she feels incapable of taking those steps on her own and wants to reach out to you to see if you might help her understand that path and be able to move forward, how can that person get a hold of you?
Well, I would love to hear from them. And I can be reached at www.zerinalifecoach.com. So that's my website where you'll see the different types of coaching services that I offer, but there is an option there to contact me directly. And I would love to hear from anyone who's struggling and going through that. And sometimes a discovery call is just a great starting point, whether you choose to work with me or not. I think it's just a good step to ask for help to get you to that process and whatever journey you're going through.
Well, Zerina, I appreciate your heart and what comes out of that heart, the energy to want to be helpful to people who are confused, to women who are struggling, to women who don't know how to take that next step forward. And out of your own story and out of your own frustration, the things you've learned, bringing that into a place where you help others move forward as well. I love that. So thank you for doing it. And thank you for having this conversation with my listeners today.
Thank you so much, Tim, for having me on. I really appreciate it.